Hello, I'm Rob Shimshock with the Campus Unmasked project of Rebel Media, and today I'm here with Jessica Marzuko, who's the National Director of Christians United for Israel on campus, as well as Michael Lochran, who's a CUFI activist from Trinity Western University. So I guess I'll start with you, Jessica. Tell us a bit about CUFI on campus and some of your main accomplishments, as well as some of your setbacks this past school year.
I'd love to. This year, we're really excited that CUFI on campus is celebrating its 10th year. We have educated thousands of Christian students across the nation, and this year we have our largest number, over 600 students representing over 300 campuses across the United States and Canada. So we are really excited about the growth we're seeing, the passion in our students, and to your other question of something we're really excited about, one of our greatest accomplishments is passing anti-divestment legislation. If anyone is familiar with the battle on campuses concerning Israel, it is BDS. Boycott, divestment, and sanction is essentially a delegitimizing campaign to demonize the state of Israel. And on Hawaii Pacific University in Honolulu, the most diverse university in the United States, we have passed anti-divestment legislation, clearly proclaiming that Jewish students and Israeli students who come to this school will not be demonized, will not be intimidated, will not be bullied, will not be singled out.
Great. Now, so on Rebel Media's Campus Unmasked project, and I think you mentioned you watched a couple of the episodes, some of the most viral content is often the Students for Justice in Palestine and related mob disruptions and shutdowns of Israeli student meetings. So, but then a savvy onlooker might point towards the professors who are no doubt giving these students animus towards Israel through their curriculum. And finally, you have the administrators themselves who are, while you have the students groups who pass BDS initiatives sometimes, the referendums, the actual decision to divest ultimately lies in the hands of administrators. So my question for you guys is, do you think the biggest threat to pro-Israel groups lies on, do you think the biggest threat to pro-Israel groups stems from the students, the professors, or the administrators on campus? Either one.
Sure. I would say it's a mix of all these things because obviously there's a media buzz that goes on with BDS, and it's the idea of social justice that prominates throughout media, throughout all kinds of different communication channels, and then it's reinforced within the classrooms. And administrators throughout Canada at many universities, including the University of British Columbia, as a matter of fact, very close to Trinity West University, has been quite supportive of it and silent in the face of a BDS vote across the campus brought forward by the student government at University of British Columbia. So that's a big concern. And I don't think that it's something that is one group's fault. I don't think it's just the faculty in the classrooms. I think it's an orchestrated effort brought to you by social justice or cultural Marxism or whatever it may be. There's a lot of issues. But the other major issue, and I know people don't like to talk about, is anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism is a very big issue. And at the conference, I heard a really great rebuttal to this, and it's the BDS for build, develop, and support. And I think that's a great rebuttal to BDS as in BDS with boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And there's another rebuttal which is BDS, but just take out the D. So BS. But that's what I would say. It's a group issue from all of those groups.
That's great. And I completely agree with everything Michael said. And one of the elements of BDS that is most visible is SJP and the student groups that are so vocal, and they're really intimidating to students. We've had students who've had rocks thrown at them. They have been spit on. We've had our students supporting the Jewish community and the Israel message in divestment hearings at UC Davis, who have been afraid to walk back to their dorm after the divestment hearing because of the hatred and the anger in the room. So the visibility of SJP is the most intimidating factor. The most influential is the administration. It is those professors on tenure who are not going anywhere, who are in the classroom intimidating students who want to speak out in support of Israel and shaming them into silence. And in some cases, their grades are at stake just for disagreeing with what the professor says. So all of these elements play a different role, the most visible being SJP.
Yeah, thank you. And I like what you described kind of like as a confluence of effects. So you have the more bureaucratic manifestations of things with the administrators, and then the professors who are actually giving the build up to what then becomes very incendiary backlashes against pro-Israeli students on campus. So my next question is, can you give us some examples of the impact divestment has on Israel, both economically, but then also scholastically, in terms of partnerships between American and Israeli universities?
I think one of the most important factors and the most important impacts that BDS has is propaganda. With this issue, it truly is whoever gets there first wins. Whoever is introducing their message first wins, regardless of the facts. If someone is presenting horrific photographs to someone and telling them this is what someone's doing to children, of course, as human rights loving, social justice loving millennials, we're going to say that is outrageous. How could they do that? Before the pro-Israel community can step in and lay out the facts and say this is a hate propaganda campaign. Let's talk about context. Let's talk about history. Let's talk about how Israel has the greatest level of human rights in the Middle East. So when you look at the impact of BDS and the effects it has, propaganda truly is dangerous. We have a Holocaust survivor that we bring to campus, his name Irving Roth, and he always says that never underestimate the power of propaganda. He experienced firsthand Hitler's propaganda that almost wiped out the Jewry of Europe. So we tell our students, you cannot underestimate this propaganda, and the other side is not slowing down. I sat in a tiny airport in Utah with Irving Roth, and we were watching the news waiting for our flight, and it was the knifing intifada, the stabbing intifada in Israel. And I watched this 87-year-old man sit there and watch this news, and he looked at it and he said, I won't stop because they don't stop. And this is the propaganda we are fighting. And this is the level of hatred that our students deal with. And we need to come alongside the Jewish community. And for once, the church, we are Christians United for Israel, say, you are not alone. And the first time in 2,000 years, the church can come alongside the Jewish people. So we are very proud to be doing this. Anything you'd like to add?
The other issue is those that are supportive of BDS who are uneducated on the economic factors in that. This also has a massive negative effect on Palestine, and especially the West Bank, where there is industry and there are jobs at stake and there are things being produced in Palestine, and there's all kinds of other technologies. So if people really want to do BDS, they better get rid of their iPhones. They better get rid of their GPS system. They better realize that all the artificial intelligence and AI development that's going on in the world is being led largely by Israel and Israelis within different parts of the world, but they're still citizens of Israel. And there's all kinds of other innovations that are taking place with water and energy development and such things like this, that if, especially if you're supposed to be an environmentalist and you go to that particular altar at the environmentalist groups go to, I would say that you should probably be supportive of Israel, because the innovations and the inventions and all of the economic development that's happening in Israel, that's also affecting positively other parts of the world and the West Bank and Palestinians, to give them all a better quality of life. So I think it's more about turning it and saying, let's be constructive instead of destructive.
Great, thanks. And so, can you give us, why do you believe, because I see so often, I report on this kind of stuff, why do you believe that the defacement of property, the disruptions of campus events, and just the general dissolution of civility on campus seem to stem almost without exception from one side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Why is that?
You know what? I think that answers something we would all like to know. I believe that with our generation, the millennial generation, anger and outrage is seen and displayed as the side of truth. If you are this angry that you're tearing things down, of course you must be right. I believe even that is a form of propaganda and manipulation. If you are flipping out to the point you're overturning garbage cans and, defacing, public property, you must be so outraged by something that is happening to you. The level of outrage has nothing to do with who is right. You look at for example, the Islamic extremism in the Middle East. When you look at the terrorist attacks going on in Israel, when SJP presents this on campus, they say, okay, if this person is willing to blow themselves up, what atrocities must be being perpetrated against them? Palestinian terrorism is no different than the terrorism going on in the rest of the Middle East. Israel is 1% of the landmass in the Middle East. It is the exact same terrorism. The justification that someone is flipping out means that the outrage and the offense is so great is not true. That, I believe, is a form of manipulation, and frankly, it is very childish, and I believe that the Israeli side and the conservative side, we want to bring life, we want to bring a future, we want to bring hope, we want things to improve. We have hope for peace in the Middle East. We have hope for peace between Israelis and the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. We don't want to burn the house down around us. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is the difference.
I totally agree. I totally agree with Jessica on this. I think that there's a level of outrage that can't go any further. And it's almost like the outrage meter just keeps going up and up and up. And it's like, when's the worst thing ever going to stop? Everything seems to be going on like this. It's the worst thing ever in this massive outrage and this inciting violence and things like this. It's so unproductive. And it shuts down the dialogue, not just debate, but dialogue, like actually having a conversation about things and not even getting to the debate yet, but actually talking about this stuff and becoming educated properly by hearing all the sides instead of just going with what you hear on the news. And this is something we've also heard here is there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that somebody mentioned at the conference here about a quote by Mark Twain that said that, those that don't read the news are ill-informed. But those that do read the news are misinformed. And sometimes we need to do a little bit more. And it doesn't always take a lot of effort to get the other side and do some research. And anyone can do this now. We've got the internet. It's available to us. There's a lot of sources out there, and you can check those sources. So working with CUFI and getting your information also from Christians United for Israel, seeing what CUFI has to say, CUFI, and seeing what they're doing and what information they have available as well can help in this.
Right, I really like your point about the depreciation of debate on campus, because so often we see now left-wing and pro-Palestinian activists, calling people racist, then it moved to fascists, then it was Nazis, perhaps most hysterically when referring to Jewish and Israeli students. And so, yeah, you wonder how can they really trump that at this point. So one other question I had was, what tactics do you believe are the most effective for pro-Israel students to use to spread their message on campus?
Mm-hmm. I think because history is on our side and facts are on our side and hope is on our side, our best tactic is just education. Letting people know what is really going on. The other side, they have their buzzwords, they have their emotional hot topic buttons, and we tell our students the facts are on our side. We just have to educate. So our greatest tactic is to go around the protests and the mock die-ins and everything everyone is doing that is turning people off. So continue doing that, SJP. You're doing a great job. But what we tell our students to do is bring hope. Tell the truth. Tell the fact that just imagine what could be if both parties came to the table and negotiated for peace. On campus, people want answers. Everyone wants to support the victim. That is admirable. What a lot of people don't understand is in this situation, Israel is the David. Israel's not the Goliath. In the Middle East, Israel is the David in this conflict. And Israel's being portrayed as the strong man and the one in a power position. Again, Israel is 1% of the landmass in the Middle East, a hostile region that wants to, has said they will, and desires to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They are the David in this situation. So our tactic is the truth and education. So we take our students from a zeal and a desire to tell the truth, and we give them the tools they need with CUFI and outlets like the Rebel Media, bringing this information out there. This is exactly what will make a difference. This is the greatest tactic. It's speaking the truth.
Another big issue to get the message out on campus, especially for millennials and those that are supportive of Israel, that are informed, that know the facts, that understand the context of the facts as well, is knowing that Israel is a leader for human rights in the region. That if you want to look at, let's say, women's rights, for example, look to Israel because they're the only one in the entire region that has a level of rights and protections and equality given to women within the society. And that's just something that's not shown there. Also, some people don't realize, but the Supreme Court of Israel had an Arab Christian as a judge on the Supreme Court of Israel. And that's something that they don't talk about as well. When it comes to humanitarian aid, Israelis and the IDF are sometimes the first responders to this, whether it's something going on in Central South America, whether it's actually something going on in Syria, where I believe it's up to 4,000 Syrian refugees that Israel has helped and supported by bringing literally thousands of tons of food and clothing, and they've done healthcare. They've actually brought people over the border into Israel to hospitals, and it's like, what more do these millennials and these social justice warriors want? Because it can't always be about the totem pole of the worst victim and the victim virtue and who's the most oppressed out of all the oppressed. It's like, let's stop and realize we're all human beings. And we can't keep doing this. We've got to realize that if we're going to be constructive and we're going to solve these problems, we can't keep demonizing a group without the facts, and especially with all the good that Israel is doing in that region. And by the way, there is no safer place in this world for the most persecuted group on the planet, and that is Christians, than Israel when it comes to the Middle East. So if you want to be, if you're hoping for safety, you're hoping for at least some human rights, and you're hoping for some level of protection against brutality and possible genocide that's going on throughout the continent of Africa and throughout the Middle East against Christians, there's nowhere else you can go but Israel. And I think that it's not just the United States that should have their embassy moved to Israel. It's Canada, because it's a statement. We have countries in Central America, we have countries in Asia that are actually considering moving their embassies to Jerusalem. And being a Canadian from Canada, I can't understand why we were not number 2. So it's time for Canada to be number 2 before anyone else is.
All right, well, Jessica Marzuko and Michael Loughran representing Christians United for Israel. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much.